Let's go back to the year 1995, when a newish thing called the internet was becoming more mainstream. It was a time when you would have to ask your parents to not use the phone so you could get online. But it was also the beginning of something, a new way of life that only a select few had embraced. And it was time for Hollywood to take notice.
The password is nipple.
It is time we update our passwords from love, sex, secret, and God, and take a deep dive into one of the most quintessentially 90s movies ever made. Let's find out what the happened to this movie. Although most of us only became familiar with cyberspace in the 90s, it had actually been around since the 1960s, when Steve Crocker sent the first ARPANET, or Advanced Research Projects Agency Network, message from UCLA to Stanford. This was back in 1969. For the next 14 years, access to the ARPANET was limited to only a select few academic and research types who had contracts with the Defense Department. It wouldn't be until January 1st, 1983, when the true rise of the internet began, as that is considered the official birthday of the internet, when a new communication protocol was established, Transfer Control Protocol / Internetwork Protocol, which would allow different computers on different networks to talk to each other. With this new age of digital communication among us, it wouldn't be long before people found a way to exploit the universal connectivity. But it wasn't old men sitting in smoke-filled dungeness basements. It would be kids barely able to shave their faces that would embrace this new technology. For many of them, it was seen as an escape from the real world, when the threat of an attack on the US was a real worry. Schools would practice duck and cover drills to prepare for a potential attack from Russia, so hacking was a way to block out the noise. In 1984, Eric Corley, better known as Emmanuel Goldstein, in a not-so-veiled reference to George Orwell's 1984, launched the magazine 2600, The Hacker Quarterly. By 1986, the year the government officially made hacking an illegal activity, fans of the magazine would begin having in-person get-togethers in the atrium of the Citibank building in New York. These meetings had humble beginnings of only a few people for the first few years, but by the early 90s, people would fly in from all around the world to attend. Two people who would attend during this time were Mark Abeen, who went by the handle Fiber Optic, and a man named Raphael Moreau, who wasn't a hacker but an aspiring screenwriter who wanted to write a script about hackers. It would seem logical that this group of underground hackers would want to keep their lifestyles private, but it was actually quite the opposite. Moreau, Abeen, and Goldstein would all go out to dinner after the meetings, with Moreau building up trust in them that showed his intentions were to write an accurate depiction of their lifestyles. Because at the time, hackers were making headlines for being arrested, and their stories were being told by the federal government to make them out as bad guys. So they felt they needed to come out of the shadows and make sure no one else was telling their stories. Over the next few months, the three would continue to meet up with other hackers in the East Village of New York and just talk about their lives, developing story ideas, telling true stories and inside jokes that would make their way into the film, such as the time they really did fire a flare gun at a security booth while dumpster diving for shredded documents, and even naming the bad guy the Plague after one of their close friends who used that handle. At the time, the Exxon Valdez oil spill had just happened in Alaska, and it was during one of these hangout sessions when the idea of using a computer virus to capsize an oil barge came up. Even the virus in the film, the Da Vinci virus, is an in-joke to a real virus called the Michelangelo virus that famed antivirus and criminal John McAfee had become famous for, as he spoke to numerous media outlets blaming hackers for the virus that was a time bomb virus, rumored to take out the entire computing world's hard drives. Ultimately, that never happened, and many believe that McAfee made up the entire thing as a way to boost sales in his antivirus software. When Moreau finished his script, he let all of his hacker buddies read it. They loved it and found it extremely authentic. But now it was time to find a way to get the script into the hands of someone who could actually make it. Across town, a man named Jeff Kleeman was an executive with Paramount at the time. He decided one night to grab a drink at the hotel bar. The bartender was a young lady named Kristen, and the two struck up a strictly platonic conversation when they talked about their relationships and other topics. When Kleeman was about to leave, Kristen said to him that he and her husband would probably get along really well and they should grab lunch. Kleeman says this isn't the type of thing he would normally do, but since he was so used to the West Coast world where all everyone did was talk Hollywood,
what was I talking about?
he was actually looking forward to meeting some normal people. So he accepted the invite, and over the course of the next few years, the three of them became close buddies. It would be at one Thanksgiving dinner when Kristen's husband, Raphael Moreau, would tell Kleeman about how he had been putting together a spec script about the world of computer hackers, and asked if he would read it, which he did and he loved. By this time, 1992, Kleeman had left Paramount and was working for Francis Ford Coppola's company, American Zoetrope. Kleeman would bring the script to Coppola, who also loved it. Kleeman would pull some strings then and get Moreau an agent with William Morris, who would call him a few days later and tell him they got a competing offer from another major producer, and unless they had a better offer, they were going to sell the script to that producer, which really annoyed Kleeman as he had pulled all the strings to get Moreau an agent. Kleeman decided that he didn't like the way the agent was playing her cards and told her that if that's how they want to play it, after he brought them the client, then just go with the other producer.
Ow! Oh! Ow! Have you ever seen such cruelty? Oh!
The other producer was a man named Michael Pazer, who had produced films like Desperately Seeking Susan, Ruthless People, and more. He saw the film as a modern-day version of The Conversation, telling a story about how people will lose their identity to the emergence of the internet age. But as things go in Hollywood, the film would languish in peril for a few years, until Jeff Kleeman was asked to come back on the project, telling them the only way he would actually come back was if the William Morris agent that screwed him over in the past was not a part of it. Raphael Moreau would get a new agent, and Kleeman, who was now an exec at MGM/United Artists, would bring the script to the head of the company, John Calley, who loved it. Pazer would remain on the film as a producer, but would ultimately depart just prior to filming as the decision was made by Kleeman and Calley to bring in a producer who was more tech savvy and familiar with special effects. While the script was being secured by United Artists, the Sundance Film Festival was about to go on. United would get a sneak preview of one of that year's big entries, a film about the early days of the Beatles titled Backbeat, directed by an up-and-coming filmmaker named Ian Softley. Kleeman says that while watching Backbeat, he got that same feeling he got when he first read the script for Hackers. It spoke to a counterculture generation. Whereas Backbeat was about music and the past, Hackers was about tech and the future. So Kleeman called up and made a great offer for a filmmaker with no big studio experience. They offered him a pay-or-play deal, essentially saying that if Softley said yes, they made the film without question, and Softley said yes, which was kind of a big get, as Backbeat had been gaining great momentum at the festival, and Softley was receiving a number of screenplays to choose from for his next project. Softley later said he chose Hackers because he liked the fairy tale-like storytelling mixed with this new world feel of the internet age. But even more intriguing was the fact that it was a Go picture that already had the support of the head of the studio. With the behind-the-camera pieces all set, it was time to cast the film. They would set up offices in New York, LA, and London, with Softley focused on finding a lead actor that you were completely captivated by. Enter Johnny Lee Miller, who had never starred in a feature film before, but had earned a solid reputation on the London stages and on BBC television. Softley says that in the audition, they knew instantly that Miller was their Dade Murphy, aka Crash Override. Finding a female lead was a bit tougher. They would fly Miller to New York to read with several actresses, including future big names like Hilary Swank, Heather Graham, Liv Tyler, Katherine Heigl, and more. Heigl reportedly was offered the role but declined due to her commitments to Under Siege 2: Dark Territory. But then they saw Miller read with an actress who had just come off the direct-to-video title Cyborg 2. Her name was Angelina Jolie, and Softly says that the instant he saw the pair read together, the chemistry was palpable, which makes sense as the pair fell in love while making the film and would be married shortly after wrap. But that real-life romance almost never happened. John Calley was hesitant to cast two unknowns as the leads of a big Hollywood film. Sometimes you need a big name to get people in the seats, something they would go up against when the film opened. Jeff Kleeman fought hard for the casting, saying sometimes you need to lose the marquee star to cast the right people. Calley, being a good boss, trusted the people he hired and let him and Softly cast the film as they saw fit. Softly says he was eternally grateful to Kleeman and Calley for backing him, and says that obviously history has proved that casting was the right choice. The rest of the ragtag group of hackers would be filled with people actually brought in to read for Dale Murphy, like Matthew Lillard and Jesse Bradford. Renoli Santiago would be cast after having 2 auditions to play Robin in Batman Forever, and while there, the casting director pulled out the script for Hackers, thinking it looked cool because the cover sheet had computer code on it. So she gave him the script to read, and after switching casting directors for the film, would ultimately get the call for the street-smart Ramon Sanchez. They would fill out the other side of the coin, the bad guys, with more seasoned performers, such as future Academy Award winner Fisher Stevens as head of security Eugene Belfort, who Stevens later said was originally meant to be played by Quentin Tarantino. There was also Academy Award nominee Lorraine Bracco as his accomplice, while the rest of the cast would be filled out with a batch of familiar faces, such as Felicity Huffman, Wendell Pierce, Penn Jillette, and Latin pop star Mark Anthony. To prepare for their roles, the actors would spend weeks together becoming friends and learning to rollerblade, while also attending the same hacker meetings in the Citibank building that writer Raphael Moreau attended when crafting the script. There, they would meet a lot of the real-life hackers that would become consultants on the film.
I want to get online. I need a computer!
Including a young Nicholas Jarecki, who once hacked Penn & Teller's website at the age of 12. After hacking Superfan and future Hackers cast member, Penn Jillette set up a contest to see who could hack the site the fastest. Jarecki would go on to be a respected filmmaker in his own right, but credits Hackers with inspiring him to become a filmmaker. One hacking consultant who couldn't make it to the film was Mark Abeen, aka Fiber Optic, one of the people responsible for helping the script be as good as it was, because in 1994, when he was just 22, he was serving a 1-year prison sentence for computer-related crimes that would ultimately have Time magazine dub him the first underground hero of the information age, the Robin Hood of cyberspace. Filming would take place in Tribeca, Battery Park, and the East Village neighborhoods of Manhattan in November 1994, before going to London to finish. Hacking consultant Emmanuel Goldstein says that he sometimes felt bad for Angelina Jolie because she seemed to be really hard on herself during filming, making sure to get every detail perfect. The script would also sometimes change on the fly, as sometimes the dialogue just didn't ring true with consultant Dave Bugwall, saying it just sounded like techno babble. So he would go to the director to give him the correct way of saying something that would sometimes upset Jolie, as she had spent a lot of time learning the lines that were written. However, Softly says that Jolie always adapted, as she truly wanted everything to be as authentic as possible. Matthew Lillard said that Johnny Lee Miller and Angelina Jolie were great leaders for the rest of the cast, as they came to set every day prepared and ready to work. And whereas the visual effects in the film may look like they were done in post using CGI, the fact is that in 1994, technology just wasn't there yet. Director Ian Softly said he wanted to visualize how hackers felt, not just seeing words on a screen, but a city of text, as he called it. So they hired John Beard, who had done a lot of practical effects on Brazil and would later build the towers of code you see and the vast cyberspace landscapes meant to look like a futuristic highway, shooting them with motion-controlled cameras to achieve a look and feel that, although not fully authentic, sure looked awesome on camera. Once the film had completed filming, it was time to put it together and find the perfect sound to match with the futuristic look. Luckily, director Ian Softly was from the UK and had his ear to the ground when it came to the burgeoning electronic scene. They would secure tracks from bands that were on the cusp of breaking out, but still seen as underground artists, such as Prodigy, Left Field, Orbital, The Underworld, and even an early Radiohead track, while they would bring on Simon Boswell to compose the score that was meant to have an almost dreamlike feel. The marketing department at MGM/United Artists was scared of the film, not knowing how to show the audience what the movie was. At the time, there weren't that many films about hacking culture, and the ones that were released showed the hackers to be bad guys. After setting up a website that not surprisingly was hacked, they actually suggested to the studio that they hold back the release of the film in order for the other films about computers and technology that were scheduled to be released that same year, Johnny Mnemonic, Virtuosity, and The Net, to release first and set the tone for the marketing. Lehman says that waiting for those films to release was a mistake, because by the time Hackers hit theaters, it already felt stale, like they were following a trend and not starting one. Released on September 15, 1995, Hackers would open with a horrible $3.2 million, finishing in 4th place, behind the second weekend of To Wong Fu, the opening weekend of Spike Lee's Clockers, and the 6th weekend of Dangerous Minds, which coincidentally also featured Renoli Santiago. Luckily, it wouldn't have the bragging rights to the worst new release of the week, as it opened far better than the film Angus, which tanked with just $1.9 million. But it wasn't just audiences that didn't respond, critics were also lukewarm. They called the film stylish but said it lacked any real substance. Roger Ebert was one of the few critics who actually gave the film a decent review when he said it was smart and entertaining, as long as you don't take the computer stuff too seriously, comparing it to about as serious as he took the archaeology in Indiana Jones. The film would only play in theaters for 2 weeks before being yanked, accumulating just $7.5 million off a reported $20 million budget. It would seem Kleeman was right, as Hackers pulled in less than Johnny Mnemonic with $19 million, Virtuosity with $24, and The Net with $49.5. Of course, all of those films did have big name talent attached, but sometimes the box office numbers don't tell the whole story. Sometimes a film can be released and no one seems to notice or care, and then something happens. That film finds new life. One person sees it and tells a friend to see it, who tells another friend, and on and on. In the case of Hackers, it may have lost the box office battle against those other films, but it has won the war.
Trashing! Trashing! Hike the planet! Hike the planet!
Shut up and get in the car!
Hike the planet!
We don't think Virtuosity had screenings across the globe for its 20th anniversary, did we? The Net, meanwhile, is more remembered for its run-of-the-mill plotline and over-serious tone, while Johnny Mnemonic is... Alright, Johnny Mnemonic is still pretty damn awesome.
Hit me.
Director Ian Softly says that they knew while making the movie that they were making a film for the future, as if they knew that contemporary audiences weren't quite ready, which makes sense when you consider that in 1995, only about 14% of homes in America had access to the internet.
Oh, that's
that little mark with the A and then the ring around it?
At?
See, that's what I said. Katie said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
But I'd never heard it.
Around
I'd never heard it said. I'd always seen the mark, but never heard it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
Ultimately, what has helped this movie stand the test of time is the fact that despite some of the visuals that didn't exactly ring true, real-life hackers say it is the most authentic film about hacking ever made, which is kind of evident now that we know the amount of research and time the writers put into the script. Hackers say they love the fact that the main characters are all likable, that it depicted who they were better than any other film about hacking. The consultants on the film even love the negative comments about the movie, the ones that say the characters were all fake and not like real people. They say it always gives them a good laugh, because the characters were essentially 100% based on them and how they were in the early 90s. The film has continued to have fan screenings over the years, including a 20th anniversary screening in 2015 that saw director Ian Softly and star Johnny Lee Miller show up to do a Q&A, where Softly said he felt the reason the film did so poorly was because it played to the teenage population, the ones who were embracing new tech, and not the ones who were writing the reviews. And as those teenagers grew up, so did the popularity of hackers. When asked why the film resonates so much with today's internet culture, people say that the film didn't take itself too seriously, and more importantly, the culture of hacking, that they could forgive the more dramatic flourishes the director took. The camaraderie of the group was reminiscent of how hackers of the time, and in the years since, actually are. They're not malicious, they're playful in a way. And of course, they still love shouting the film's catchphrases, such as "hack the planet." But one scene most hackers point to as being the quintessential scene in the movie is when Dade gets the sprinklers to go off in the school. It may seem like an unimportant scene, but for many, it perfectly showcased how the virtual world can have physical, real-world impact. For as much as people say the film got wrong and how outdated it feels, it actually was quite prescient in predicting future technology. But perhaps the biggest predictor of all, hacking may seem like an underground activity, but in reality, the heads of security for nearly every major company in the world are run by former hackers who know about all the vulnerabilities of a company's online security. Even our own government uses hackers to secure our cyber world. So much so that ex-head of the FBI, James Comey, once joked that they hire so many hackers to fight cyber criminals that they need to relax the rule against smoking marijuana to expand their applicant field. Our world has been affected so much by the rise of the internet, but it is safe to say that without a film like Hackers, we're not so sure we live in the same world. Not only did it touch on a future that was just right around the corner, it inspired many of the world's next great thinkers and innovators. And that's anybody from those developing life-changing apps to the creators of such zeitgeist entertainment as The Matrix, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and Mr. Robot. The film Hackers isn't just a cult hit with a tremendous soundtrack, it was the voice of a new generation. And although it didn't garner the respect it deserved at the time, it has gone on to be one of the most important films ever made. And that is what the happened to Hackers.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.